happy to take questions if there's time.
The Vitruvian mouse. I've never seen that before.
Yeah, I know. It's great. And that's exactly what it was called on that.
All right. We've got a question right over here. Just need a microphone.
Thank you very much. That was a fantastic presentation. I wanted to, I guess, clarify a point you made.
Yeah.
You're arguing that your data, your results show fairly conclusively that the psychosocial parts can be replicated more effectively through translational research than the bio parts.
Yeah.
But I think an important thing to acknowledge is that the bio results have been pooled across genders, whereas the psychosocial impacts that you're showing have been differentiated between sexes. So if we were doing a better job of doing the bio research, acknowledging that we need to do it with male mice and female mice, would that hypothesis or that claim you're making still stand up?
Yeah, look, I don't want you to take that hard and fast rule to the bank, right? It's obviously, both of these statements are based on a very limited and anecdotal experience, which is just experiments in my lab working or not working, right? I don't want anyone to, it's a little bit of a sort of a fiction to make a story to hang the talk off of. So I don't want you to take it too seriously, but you're absolutely right, of course. The lesson that we've been lumping when we should be splitting is, I think, very clear in my mind, and that is my lesson to pain biologists. And in fact, I've been going around the world now for 20 years trying to convince people that yes, it's practically easier to pool. You want to pool; it makes things cheaper. If it's true, pooling generalizes better. But you pool or you lump at your own risk, because there's more and more evidence to suggest that splitting is the way the world works, that the sexes have different biologies, the different strains have different biologies, the different species have different biologies, and we simply can't assume that things are the same. You have to show empirically that things are the same. But of course that takes longer, right? So that's where we are.
In your lab, are you starting to conduct more experiments that are female mice only?
I think if I used female mice only, I could be accused of the same, of the same thing that I'm accusing other people of, right? It seems to me that once you know there's a sex difference, once you know that the very biological structures that you're investigating might be sex dependent, I think you're morally obligated to do it in both sexes. If money was so tight that you had to say, I can only afford to study one sex, then it's very clear to me that sex should be female, right? But assuming that you have enough money to do experiments in both males and females, you're going to find more stuff, right? You're going to turn one paper into two. You're going to turn less interesting papers into more interesting papers. There's no reason that I can think of not to do it. But that being said, I'm clearly in the minority, because people in the pain field continue to only use male mice. They're so afraid of the variability from the estrus cycle, which, by the way, has been shown to be completely swamped by the variability from dominance interactions in males. So what they're afraid of, they shouldn't be afraid of. But they're still so afraid of it and the inertia is so strong that people just continue to do what they've always done. So, we're working on it.
We have another question in the back.
Thank you. Thank you. That was a terrific presentation. Something I'd like to give you the opportunity to comment on. You spoke about empathy in mice, and in the course of talking about that, you nearly equated it, and maybe even in one instance did equate it, with emotional contagion. And I am thinking that in a laboratory setting that equation might make sense, but then in a clinical setting, we sometimes want to be very careful not to confuse empathy, which maybe has a little bit of separateness and is not emotional contagion. Could you say more about that?
Yeah, so sure. And of course, if I had more time, I would have spent some time in this, because you're absolutely right. Empathy is a very controversial term. There's at least 20 different definitions that I've been able to dig up out there in the literature. And some people, most notably Franz de Waal, believe in the sort of Russian doll model that I showed. And I believe it too. I think this makes a lot of sense, that the core level of empathy is emotional contagion. That is, if you don't have emotional contagion, it's not possible to have true true cognitive empathy or sympathy or pro-social behavior. You need emotional contagion first, and then these higher levels of empathy build on that. But you're absolutely right that when people say the word empathy, and when we think of empathy, and when we think of it in a therapeutic context, it's not emotional contagion we're thinking of. It's several levels above. The empirical question, of course, is whether emotional contagion truly is required for these other levels to appear. Some people believe yes, and some people believe no. I believe yes. And I also believe it's the simplest thing to study in the laboratory and the best thing to start off studying in the laboratory, because all other forms of empathy you can only get into by questionnaire, and I don't believe in questionnaires. I believe that when people are given questionnaires, anyone with a 3-digit IQ figures out within seconds what the experiment is about, and that the only true way to study something is to fool people and make them believe the experiment's about something else entirely. Emotional contagion, you can do that. People have multiple pain testing, they know it's about pain, but they have no idea that the real dependent measure is the difference in the rating this time and that time, so I can pull out empathy without them having any idea what I'm studying. So that's why I like it. And I also think that you should walk before you run, so that emotional contagion is a good place to start. But you're absolutely right. That the real world is involving levels of empathy that are at much higher levels, are much more complicated, and the same rules that apply to emotional contagion might not apply. So I agree with you completely.
Great, thank you very much. We have to go to break now, but let's give a hand to the man that is going to help us feel more pain if we see each other in pain.